The tribunal is currently dealing with the first complaint filed by the 10 judges related to Judge Parker deposing to an affidavit which stated that he was physically assaulted allegedly by the then Judge President John Hlophe, who has since been impeached on the 29th of February 2019. Parker first deposed to an affidavit alleging that he was physically assaulted by Hlophe, and then a year later retracted that version in a contradictory affidavit. Now, Judge Derek Wau, who testified that he kept the first copy for safekeeping at the request of Judge Parker, gave further details on the events of that day. We have roped in a research and advocacy officer at Judges Matter, that's Mbekezeli Benjamin, to weigh in on this matter. Mbekezeli, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. So, for context, the Judicial Conduct Committee found that the first complaint of lying under oath constituted gross misconduct worthy of impeachment, and therefore recommended a tribunal would be a best place to investigate. The hearings are set now for a week. Talk to us about what we can expect over the next few days, as this matter is now finally being heard, almost 5 years after his suspension.
Good afternoon, Unati, and good afternoon to the viewers. Yes, you are quite right. The judges of the Western Cape did file a complaint against Judge Parker, and there was a separate complaint by the Cape Bar Council, which also complained against Judge Parker. Both complaints are being dealt with simultaneously. So today we heard testimony from witnesses regarding both complaints, and the picture that is painted in both complaints is that there is a level of dishonesty in how Judge Parker conducted himself. The Cape Bar Council complaint deals with dishonesty relating to the affairs of his attorney's practice, and that he did not disclose this, that is, Judge Parker didn't disclose this before he applied to be a judge, and even when he was eventually a judge, this he did not disclose to the Judicial Service Commission. So in that, they are saying that he acted dishonestly and in a manner that is not fitting for a judge. The second complaint is the one that is by 10 judges of the Western Cape High Court. And as you mentioned, it relates to an alleged assault by former Judge President Hlophe against Judge Parker, and that he later recanted that version. So he gave a contradictory version to that. And so today's proceedings really were about those witnesses. A total of about 8 judges testified under the one complaint, and under the other complaint, there were 2 witnesses who testified. And it looks like the hearings have concluded today, even though they were set for a week. They concluded today, and they are now postponed to the 29th of April for closing argument.
Now, all the complainants against Parker call his integrity into question. Speak to us about how serious these charges are, particularly as they're leveled against a judge.
Well, there's nothing more gravely serious than a dishonest judge, Unati. It's one of the cardinal sins of judicial ethics is that you are dishonest. And in fact, there are many places in the Judicial Code of Conduct and in the JSC Act that speak to issues of dishonesty. Article 5, for example, says that judges must always act honorably, both in their public life as judges, but also in their private life. They must always act believe the judge must comply with the law, that a judge must not be seen to be interfering with visions.
Unfortunately, Mbekezeli, your line is rather bad. If you can hear me, perhaps it would be great if we can try and see if we can get you back. But as you were responding just to how serious, these allegations are, in fact, these charges are, just continue talking to us about then what are we likely to see in April, in fact, if he is indeed found guilty?
I'm so sorry, Unite. I think it's the load shedding. But yes, so I was saying that dishonesty is one of the gravest sins that you can commit as a judge. And for that, you may be impeached for being dishonest. And so what we are expecting to see as the tribunal draws to a close is that on the one side, the complainant judges and the Cape Bar Council will be arguing strongly for his impeachment because that is what they have put forward in their complaint. But on the other side, which was surprising for me, is that Judge Parker and his legal team didn't put any questions to any of the witnesses that appeared before the tribunal today. And so in a way, it seems as if in some ways, he is conceding to some of the allegations that are made against him. He has not really put up a version that I'm aware where he contradicts any of the witnesses that have spoken today. And so we expect that on the 29th of April, they will likely argue that it was not gross misconduct. So it is probably misconduct, but not the kind that would lead to his impeachment and removal from office.
And as we wrap up our conversation, just speak to us about, just where to place those allegations, rather, about, a firm that's closely connected to Parker, which is accused by the Legal Practice Council of possibly misusing, I think, 8 million rand of a client's money. I mean, how will this also impact on what we're currently seeing playing out?
Well, look, it has an impact indirectly on Judge Parker, because at the time at which this 8 million rand was in question, he was still a practicing attorney. He was not yet a judge. But the reason why it impacts him as a judge is because when you apply to be a judge, there is a form that the JSC requires you to fill in. And one of the questions on the form is it asks you whether you know of any circumstances, financial or otherwise, that would cause embarrassment to you becoming a judge. And his response to that question, or Judge Parker's response to that question, was no. And when he said no, at the time, it was when there were these questions about the millions that were missing from the trust account. And so in that way, it was a material non-disclosure. And that is the kind of question that the tribunal is trying to investigate. To what extent can this relate to his conduct and integrity?
All right, Mbekezeli, thank you so much for your time. Of course, Mbekezeli Benjamin is with Judges Matter. And as he rightfully points out, this matter has been then set aside for the 29th of April. Of course, we'll give you an update in as far as that is concerned.